recording too. I will go back and say that I'd like to call to order this work study session for Independent School District 624 and would ask the clerk to please read the roll.
Thompson.
Here.
Arcand. Arcand. Beloit.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Ellison here. Mullen.
Here.
Newmaster.
Here.
Okay, I believe Scott is on, correct? And he just wasn't able to answer.
He is. Arcand.
Dr. Arcand.
We can't hear you. If you could use the chat, Dr. Arcand, just to say here so I can record it for the record.
Okay, we will wait for that response and
there it is. We're good. Yep, we're good.
Okay, thank you. We will now move into our first discussion item, building asset, reducing risk, BAR update. Dr. Gillespie.
Yes, Chair Mullen, members of the board. Tonight we have the North Campus administrative team here tonight to update us on BAR, building assets, reducing risks. If you remember, way before the pandemic, we chose to implement this program as part of a Gates Foundation grant. The team will share more about this. They've implemented it this year, and I'm excited for you to hear from them. As we work towards really showing how our strategic plan is changing our organization for the better, I want to highlight that this program is aligned to Strategy 2, which is we will provide expanding access to a broad range of opportunities for all students. And also Strategy 9, which is we will imagine new concepts in learning and teaching at White Bear Lake Area High School. This is the first thing that we did as a team last year. Ms. Nelson, the principal, and Mr. Bosch, the principal at South Campus, and I, when I was on special assignment, in terms of really intentionally thinking about what type of programming do we want to start at our 912 campus. And so we're excited about you hearing more about this. So without further ado, I will introduce Ange Nelson, principal, and I'll let her introduce her teammates who are here with her.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for letting us come on today. We're really excited to give you an update about BAR. I know that throughout this year, we've mentioned BAR a few times in terms of how we're going to be supporting ninth graders, a 912 program, and social emotional learning through our iTime lessons. And so I am actually going to introduce Joe Held. He is our Student Success Dean at North Campus, and his primary responsibility is implementing BAR this year. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to give you an update, and then there will be a little bit of time at the end for any questions you have. All right, Joe.
Great. Thanks, Principal Nelson. You can go ahead and go on the slides. Thanks. So, Chair Mullen, board, I appreciate your time. Thanks for inviting me. Kind of to give you an overview of what I'm hoping to do tonight is I'm going to give you just a quick crash course of what BAR is, and then I'll give you a little bit of some insight into how it looked like in the first semester. And I just want to begin by saying, first and foremost, that right now, particularly in education, we spend quite a bit of time talking about what's not happening or what isn't going well for students. And I'm really, really excited and proud to share something that is going well and something that is happening. And I think that we can focus on that. And that's a really tremendous achievement of our team. So I'm excited to talk about it. You can go ahead and move forward. Thank you. So ninth grade, there's an overwhelming amount of data that talks about how ninth grade is really one of the most linchpin crucial years in really all of your education experience. It's a major transition. It's a transition in which you go from grades in a middle level to grades that can have long-term ramifications on college and careers. It's a very difficult time, socially, emotionally, academically. So what BAR is designed to do is to really combat some of the structures in place that make it difficult for ninth graders, and also to help them be able to kind of build up their own strengths. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, but the question I get all the time, first and foremost, is what is BAR? What does that mean? Most people think of it in terms of getting their law degree, and that's not the BAR that we're talking about. BAR is really two major pillars, and you're going to hear me reference this a couple times. The first is, how do we help students build their assets? So these are the soft skills. These are things that students need to be able to be resilient, to be able to overcome conflict, to be able to problem solve, leadership, lots of things like that. So we have a whole pillar about BAR that is about how do we help our 9th grade students build their own capacity. And then the other pillar is how do we as a system reduce the risk that they have, that many of them are facing, many of the times unbeknownst to us. You can go to the next slide, please. And the slogan of BAR that we've really adopted, and then I can launch into what it looks like at North Campus here, is same students, same teachers, better results. We're using the same staff, we're using by and large the same curriculum, and you're gonna see tonight that we have some really amazing results. And we're not waving a magic wand and changing everything. This is strictly about how do we help students be able to build themselves, and then also how do we collaborate about students. Thanks, go to the next one. So a quick overview, we have 660 9th graders currently enrolled at North Campus. Back when I was in middle school, shout out to Central Middle School, we had a whole team of all of the 7th graders and 8th graders were put into academic teams. I know that has kind of gone away in some regards, but what we've done this year as part of BAR is all 660 9th graders, or at least about 95% of them. We tried to get 100% with some late enrollments. It's changed a few things, but we've put them onto 4 academic teams. So these teams consist of language arts, geography, and physical science. So really the bulk of all 9th grade core classes, the students now have a team where they have common teachers that share them. You're going to see a little bit later about why that makes such a big difference. That really is unique. That's not something that happens often at the secondary level. So some things that are going to be new you're going to hear tonight. The student experience for 9th graders is going to have some new facets. So we're going to talk about social emotional learning, relationships, and then also a very big change in programming with BAR is the staff experience with what it looks like to communicate and to collaborate. So you can go to the next slide, please. So if you remember, I kind of talked about those 2 pillars, the first pillar being building assets. We do that through BAR through what's called iTime. So this is a designated social emotional learning curriculum that is designed to be able to help students build up their capacity and strength. So as one of my 9th grade teachers put it, this is a chance to take off your content hat and care about kids. To put it into kind of a spectrum for you, all 9th grade students once a week will have a lesson that is strictly not content related, but strictly social emotional learning. The teachers in the teams will rotate when they do this. So really it's not a large ask for our staff because it's about once a month for each of them. But if you think about it in the aggregate for what that means for 9th graders, they're going into 9th grade knowing that once a week they're going to get a lesson all about, and I kind of lifted some examples here for you, things like goal setting, how do we build your leadership, empathy, community building, looking at how do you handle grief and loss, things like determining strengths. We have over 150 different lessons that we can draw from to do this. And if you think about each of these students may not have the most tremendous lesson that changes their life, but if you think about over all of the weeks that they have the school year, it really is a big deal. And this is something that we're already seeing some benefits of. In addition to this, staff now get to build relationships with kids and they get to learn things about their personality and what makes them tick in a way that's outside of classroom related. And that's a really big deal, especially I would say in a pandemic learning landscape where it's very difficult to be able to know students, especially if you can't see them on a camera and things like that, but you get to connect with them. I have many teachers in 9th grade have told me this year that iTime is the time where they feel like they're the most like a teacher because kids are laughing, kids are talking with each other, kids are sharing some pretty vulnerable stuff with each other. And it's pretty awesome. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So that's the building assets part of it. The other major part of it is how do we reduce the risk? So I'll just very quickly cover this. We have a tiered system of support through BAR, similar to an MTSS model. It's really kind of tied to the hip of it. But every single team of teachers, so for example, our blue team, so if you remember, that's a language arts, a science, and a geography, they meet once a week. And each teacher has responsible for a cohort of kids that they look up all of their grades and we fill them into these giant Google sheets. We get together once a week, and the teachers will bring up students that they have some concerns about. And this is where they get to problem solve. How do we come around these kids that we're noticing? To give you some perspective, as a former teacher, we spend a lot of time, a lot of good time collaborating about content. We spend a lot of time talking about, if I'm a US history teacher, I'm talking with other US history teachers. What standards are we addressing? How do we measure if students are successful? How do they do on their test scores? Really, really good stuff. But if I'm a US history teacher and you're a US history teacher, we don't share the same kids. So we don't spend a lot of time talking about kids. And that's what's so unique about this, is that you have accountable, structured time where they're talking about students they share. So I might say, I talked to Joe's parents last night and I learned this about their life situation. Well, if I learned that and I share that with my bar team, now all of their core teachers have that really valuable insight that they maybe wouldn't have previous to this. These are a lot of interventions and conversations that are happening. So we talk about students, and if there's a concern that is maybe bigger than the classroom, we kind of zoom out, and then later that week we have what's called a big block meeting. So we bring in their guidance counselor, we bring in their interventionist, maybe if they're special ed student, we bring in their case manager. Really, we're expanding our level of support about these kids. And then if there's further concerns, if we still can't help them, it goes out to our risk review, which is really our 9th grade SAT. So I know that's a lot of information. I know it's kind of a little overwhelming, but just to help put it into really the best context, as somebody who's been on SAT teams, oftentimes what happens is when a student gets referred to you, you spend the first week or two trying to figure out who is this kid, what's going on, what's their concern. You're trying to do a lot of the digging. For BAR, for 9th grade, I can confidently say that whenever a 9th grade student is at that risk review, that top level of concern, we know so much about them. We have a data wall that we've tracked what interventions we've tried, what hasn't worked, who has been a part of that. We then have another tier with their counselor. The counselor is called home. They know things about this kid. By the time they get to our big kind of our risk, we know a lot about them and we can hit the ground running. That's a really, really big thing to help minimize academic and personal crisis before it happens. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So that's your crash course in BAR. Trust me, I've spent a whole year trying to learn what BAR is. And so there you have it in about 5 minutes. But to put it into context of kind of what this looks like at North Campus right now, we have met, and this is all just first semester data, we met 37 times to talk specifically about kids. And I want to stress that we're talking about the students themselves as whole kids and not just about test scores. We've met for a total of over 74 hours, and we have discussed explicitly 272 9th graders. So that's about 40% of our 9th grade students have had their core teachers sit down in a meeting and talk about their strengths, areas of growth, some concerns. We talk about kids who don't have any concerns, but maybe we have some social emotional things that we want to talk about. We're projected to hopefully end the year at about 80% of our 9th graders will have had staff talk about them specifically. That is really, really, really a big deal, because at the secondary level, we don't talk a ton about kids because there's so many teachers, right? So it's hard to follow up. So you can go to the next slide. And I'm kind of close to wrapping up here. So as you may imagine, some students take a lot more conversation than others. Some students we talk about one time. Other students we talk about many, many times because we're trying many interventions. I just want to point out that in the fall of 2020, you should be very proud of your North Campus 9th grade staff, because they have done 452 specific interventions or conversations about 9th grade kids. These are 452 conversations that wouldn't have happened the previous year. And the best part about it is that these are accountable conversations. These are conversations that are not just teachers maybe speaking negatively about a student that's frustrating them or just boasting about a kid that's doing well in their class. This is sitting down as a team and saying, how can we do what's best for this kid? 452 times makes a big impact in their whole career as they move forward. And you can go on. It would be unfair of me to not talk about this, and I have one last slide after this, but to not share how impressive our 9th grade team is. As you all know more than anybody else, this year has been really, really difficult on students. It's been hard on families. It's been hard on staff. And to start implementing a whole transformative new programming at 9th grade in this school year is a huge ask. And all these individuals that you see before you are ones who have risen to the occasion. And they've really been the ones to say, this is more work than my peers are doing. However, these things help kids catch kids in a way that we've not been able to in a year that we need it more than ever. So it would be unfair of me not to really kind of boast about them. And then go to the last slide here. My biggest takeaways, and I can just wrap up by saying, we really need to spend time remembering that we're talking about students as whole students and not just names on grade books. Understanding that barriers to learning exist and that relationships matter. Those are all things that are foundational to teaching. We could all recite those, but to actually see it in person in a very macro way is really, really cool. And frequent, intentional, and I'll say this again, accountable conversations about the strengths of students is the key to success. And so I'm just going to end with this. I just want to celebrate publicly with our board that our 9th grade has one of the highest passing rates currently out of all grades 9 through 12. That's not something that happens often, maybe ever. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the data, but I just want to say we have the same teachers, same students, and we're getting some really tremendous results in a really hard year for kids that are transitioning during a pandemic. So that's all I have for you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gillespie, before I open it up, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I just want to reiterate, this is not a tiny thing that they did. They had to completely redo the schedule to see the results that they've seen in a pandemic is amazing. And so just thanks to the teachers, to Joe, to Ange, and the whole administrative team over there. It has been a lot, and their commitment the whole time is something that is special about White Bear and especially North Campus.
All right. Ms. Beloy, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I did, Chair Mullen. I think this is fabulous. When I read over this and I looked it up and kind of looked into some more detail on it, but you referenced it a few times that these are accountable conversations. What makes them accountable conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I say accountable, I mean that there is a coordinator like myself who is attending all of the meetings to make sure that we are maximizing. We have timekeepers that we're talking about as many students as we can. And then when there is a concern that we've identified with a student, we assign a staff member to be that person that's going to follow up about whatever we came up with as a team. And then the next week, part of my job and responsibility is say, all right, Joe, last week we said this about Tommy. What did you find out when you called out about home? So this is really making sure that follow through happens. That's what I mean by accountable. That's a great question.
So what's the documentation process? So how do you know that this is the third, fourth, fifth time you've seen a student, or how do you know that you've never spoken about a student?
Yeah, we have, each team has a massive mega Google spreadsheet that I think if I never look at another Google spreadsheet again, I'll probably be okay. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cells deep. And every time we talk about a new student, we fill in a new line. So we fill in all of their grades, and it's color coded. So, if somebody's not passing, it pops out at you right away. It's interesting to look at trends of some students over many weeks. So if you have 5 weeks of data about a kid, you've talked about him 5 times, you can see, wow, it's a lot of green, and then all of a sudden it's yellow and red. And now you start asking questions of what's happened to Joey that over the last month he's tanked, or he's done really well in this class, but not this one. What's going on? So it's tracked mostly through our Google Sheets.
So does that also track the intervention strategies that are used with the students?
Yep.
And does that also indicate which teachers or which interventionist has done that particular thing with that student?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, correct.
So then my last question was, so this is for 9th grade. This is something that we're continuing. So for the now 8th graders going into 9th grade, this would be something that we'd be doing for them next year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about, because my 8th grader is going to be a 9th grader. So,
well,
so I'm very happy to see this.
He'll have a team. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure I'll know lots about him and he'll never know my name, so that's fine.
Oh, I wouldn't bet on that. No, I think I really like this. I think this is great. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beloit. Vice Chair Chapman, did you have a question?
I do. The question I've got is we had just prior to this meeting had a session of Voices of White Bear and talking about the equity initiative that's taking place, and just curious to what level or to what extent are the cultural liaisons brought into these discussions? I mean, early on or at later stage? I mean, just wanting to get a feel of their involvement.
That's a very good question. There's kind of two answers to that. The first is they get brought in as early as the team deems necessary. So we kind of talk about how we're triage size of our groupings. We bring in people that we think have a voice that maybe has some insight that we would want. Excuse me. So we've brought the cultural liaisons in even in our first meeting. If it's saying, you know what, I know this, I don't know much about this student, but I know they work with this person. Let's bring them in because they know the family, and all of a sudden we all have that insight very quickly. I would say in addition to that, what we've done to kind of create some supports at North Campus is creating our academic pods, which we're doing on Fridays. We have over 100 students that have been invited to join our academic kind of intervention pods on Fridays. And that it really was born out of the cultural liaisons. They did a tremendous job of thinking up what supports they need for some students. And a lot of students are being identified, specifically ones that have some academic concerns, are being identified through our BAR system. And so it's kind of two avenues. We either bring them in if we know specifically that they could be working with this student or family, or we've brought them up to them because, hey, we have some academic concerns. Do you know much about them? If not, let's get them plugged into one of your academic pods.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chapman. Ms. Thompson, did you have a question?
I have a question, and then just obviously have to say thank you for this work. It is absolutely amazing, and I think the fact that the ninth grade has the highest passing rate says a lot for what this work does and can do. And I look forward to us implementing it in our other grades. And ninth grade is a big transition year for our students. So seeing this wonderful impact and this work is just amazing. And in the midst of this pandemic, wow. So I applaud all of those who worked on this. This is great. I would be interested in seeing the difference between the passing rate for this ninth grade class as compared to others, as you had mentioned. Maybe we could look into that. So if we could get those numbers, I would appreciate seeing them.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. Truly just fantastic.
We can send some of that along. You know, we've done some comparisons with previous years. It's so hard because the grading system is different now than it was then, and because we're in a pandemic, so it's challenging. But I know one thing that Joe is a part of is he actually meets with other schools that have implemented BAR nationwide once a month. And they also look at that type of data. And I'll just give a shout out to Joe because White Bear Lake is receiving lots of national attention for the BAR program and its implementation in its first year and the success we're seeing. And so we're feeling really good about that. But we can get you that, although in terms of comparing it, it's really difficult. We'll have better comparison, I would say, for next year.
Yeah, I mean, if we have to, I mean, it's just the work itself is fantastic. So it's something that we should definitely think about tracking, and I'm sure we are. And yeah, how exciting. So thank you.
Ms. Thompson, I can bring it too. We're going to talk about some grading data, so I can bring historical data for our seniors and our freshmen. So we can work on that for us.
Great. Thank you, Allison.
Yep, no problem.
Is that it, Ms. Thompson?
That's it. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Newmaster.
Well, I also have to just applaud everybody with the work. And when I saw the team that was involved and knew so many of them, I thought, Oh, I knew you would be right in the midst of all of that. And I think this sees us trying to actually do the policies that change the system that impact the kids. So this is some of the giving the kids equal access and an equal chance. So, you know, it's big. And having been a teacher, it's a lot of work. I look at all of that and I think of that team and how powerful you are and how exhausted you must be. So thank you and hooray.
Thank you, Dr. Newmaster. Ms. Beloit, did you have an additional question?
Yeah, I just had well, 2 or 3 additional questions. So the funding for this was through a grant. So
Yep.
how do we see that grant being renewed the next couple of years? What's the status of that?
It's actually a 5-year grant that we're a part of.
Oh, okay.
And so, yep, we're good for 5 years, and they help us in terms of sustainability, and it's a really great opportunity. And part of it is also supporting our 10, 12 teachers in improvement science and looking at how do we examine interventions that we're doing and their impact on students. So it's a big deal to be a part of it.
And this
It's
question
a really big, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Hill.
Oh, I was just going to say, we are a part of a small group of schools across the country that have been a part of this. It is a pretty big deal to be part of this grant. And I know many of us are having the conversations of when this grant runs out, what does that mean? And a lot of us are having a conversation of kind of utilizing this as training wheels for how we want to have White Bear do some teacher collaboration on our own volition and not necessarily needing it to be part of tied to this BAR grant.
Is this something that we see, is it something that we can roll out on our own, that we don't need the additional funding through outside sources to keep going forward after 5 years? Do we think that this is something that would just continue on because we'll put everything in place and it'll just kind of be happening like it would normally be happening in a school year?
Yeah, it's actually a grant that the majority of the support we get is actually through the network and things like that. The monetary amount is not something that would be prohibitive for us to figure out how to support it internally. So, yep, we could absolutely continue forward. And part of it that's really unique is the BAR program is one of very few initiatives in education that has gone through multiple levels of research and continues forward. So eventually it will have what's called empirical research, which education hardly has things around its impact for students and closing opportunity gaps in terms of racial gaps. And that is part of the reason that we leaned into this opportunity. So it is really exciting that we're a part of it.
So do we find that there's a lot of social emotional problems that are happening with the students that then trend into academic problems? And do we deal with both of those at the same time? And I know some of these students might have case managers. Are they brought in on these things as well?
That's a very astute question. I would say 99% of the time there is some social emotional concern that gets manifested when there's major academic concerns. I think that our students I think there's a bump and increase in that this year in particular. And I would say that this system is helping us to be able to identify some students that have some of these concerns social emotionally that we never would have caught before. Many students over the past years that maybe would have benefited from this type of eyes on and asset building. So, and yes, we bring in case managers whenever we need them. Sometimes we have weeks where we target specific just special ed students and all teachers want to discuss special ed, and we bring in every case manager in the school to those meetings to help us out.
Yeah, and I'm also just thinking in terms of special ed and also our students of color that may be high achievers. Maybe they don't have an issue with grades, but maybe this will help us catch those other issues that are happening in terms of furthering the equity work that we've been doing to help those people through those issues. So I think this is good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beloit. Ms. Ellison, did you have a question?
I do. I have 2 comments and a question. One, I've been hearing a lot in the public conversation, this narrative that this is a lost year. And I would just like to say that this is just one piece of evidence from this district that this is certainly not a lost year, and that our students and our teachers and staff are doing tremendous work to move forward. And so I think this is excellent. And the other comment I had was, this seems like this would be a great opportunity to increase connections with families. I think as our students get older, you don't have the same connections that you did when students were younger. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like this is a great way to extend those connections.
Yeah. So BAR in itself is, I didn't get into it just because it can take too much time, but it has 8 components of it. And one of them is, the idea is that schools are usually doing all of these things in some capacity, but it's a way of kind of putting it all streamlined into one thing. And a major part of it is parent involvement. And that is definitely our biggest area of growth that I'm looking forward to future years, especially in the onboarding of 9th graders and welcome week, and kind of the getting parents, having a parent advisory board would be something that the coordinator would manage. All of that is for sure a part of the BAR system. This has just been kind of one of the years where most of the BAR coaches that I talk to internationally are saying that schools across the country aren't really at that place with parents' involvement yet, just because of the pandemic learning. But that is definitely something that we look forward to next year.
Excellent. And then my question is that, this is happening in 9th grade because it's such a transition year. Does the BAR program also apply to 6th grade, or is it something that's more for our older students?
Yeah, I was just going to say they do have BAR. It looks a little different, but there are BAR programmings for middle school. And then actually there's a bunch in elementary school now too. So again, it looks different. I think tracking grades and things look different. How we communicate is different, but they are broadening. I know that there are some schools around us in the metro that are actually, I think Stillwater being one of them, that is now implementing it in a lot of their their elementary and middle level.
Great. Thank you so much for all of your work, for all the admin work and teacher work and staff work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Mr. Chapman, do you have another comment or question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Mention was made earlier in this discussion about that White Bear was getting some national recognition. I was just wondering, with respect to BAR, just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit. I'm curious as to what that recognition has entailed so far.
Joe is really humble, so I'll just brag on his behalf because he's an amazing leader, and he was the absolute right person for this job. But so he on Thursday is actually going to be presenting at all of the nationwide PLC. They have groups that meet for BAR, and he'll be presenting at all of those, talking about the White Bear Lake journey to where we were pre-BAR, where BAR, our journey through the training of BAR, which was a turbulent time here in Minneapolis in the spring, and then where we are now and all the adjustments that have been made. And Joe works with a coach through the BAR organization who I have also been able to meet with several times, and he just praises Joe and says that our teams and our teachers are doing really high level work and that we're being talked about in schools across the country because of the work that we're doing, which is pretty incredible given that it's our first year of implementation. So.
Yeah, and thank you, Ange. Those are kind words. There's lots of areas of growth where we certainly want to have a higher success rate for sure. This is we have lots of areas, but it goes from top to bottom. I mean, as far as Principal Harriman doing scheduling and getting 95% of our 9th graders into the teams, a lot of first year schools, the status quo that they have is 50% is what they require schools to do for fidelity. And Principal Harriman got it up to 95%. That's a huge deal in your first year. So that's a big part of it. Getting teachers to have common time. There's many components with many moving pieces. And I think they've been particularly interested in a lot of our switching with learning models and the rotation of our schedule that we've been able to navigate some things that have changed rapidly has been an awesome thing.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's awesome work. Great to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Are there any other questions, comments? Okay, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Gillespie, to close up.
All right, just thank you so much to North Campus and all your work on that on behalf of kids and families. You're appreciated, and we're excited to support you as you continue moving forward.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
It was an honor. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your work. We will now move to our next agenda item, which is the strategic plan update. Dr. Kazmierczak.
All right, thank you, Chair Mullen, members of the board. So I think what we just saw is a good example of why we need to make sure we're very intentional about updating you on the good work that's happening because of our strategic plan. And so I'm going to actually turn it over to Dr. Gillespie and have her talk a little bit about our plan moving forward in terms of updating the community and the board on that plan. So Allison, it's all yours.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so that was a great example. I think it's really important to identify that our strategic plan has really become an authentic part of our organization and is not something that people talk about per se in terms of trying to meet inauthentically. And so how can we as a cabinet and elevate the work that's happening in our buildings, our sites, and through our departments, and really make sure that we are highlighting the work that's going on in our throughout our district as it aligns to the strategic plan. And I think that is a great example of ways that we're looking to do that. And so each month we are going to highlight work that's occurring throughout our district, and talk about how it's aligned to the strategic plan, but a lot of times the people doing the work don't even realize it. And to me, that's the greatest way, because we talk about student agency, we talk about moving forward in the future of learning, we talk about our facilities and how excited we are to emerge as a more strategic organization outside of this pandemic. And I have never seen that happen in an organization. And so to me, it feels authentic, and me or Dr. Kazmierczak standing in front of you and going through that work is not as meaningful nor impactful as it is having the people who are engaged in the work day in and day out. And so our goal is to have people in the buildings and sites and in our district departments highlight great work that's aligned to our strategic plan each month. Steve, you can move forward on this slide, or Marissa, thanks. And then we will have a public dashboard. It's been a little delayed to getting it forward. Marissa and I are going to work through some kinks that may or may not exist in this last update that cabinet members did. And really what will look like on our strategic plan website is there will be an overall graphic that people can click on, and it will go to a summary page. So for each strategy, there will be an update of this is the general work that's occurred, and then there'll be these summary wheels and percentages to show the public the progress that we're making on the strategic plan. And so we will definitely update you once it's live and what that looks like, either through one of these updates or Dr. Kazmierczak and his update to the board. And so really knowing that we're going to shift these updates to make sure that we're elevating work that's occurring in our district. And so tonight was about strategy 2 and strategy 9, but also I wanted to highlight just continued work, you can go to the next slide, around strategy 1. And we talk a lot about students and staff becoming agents in their own learning, which really means how can they lead their learning. And this year, as we all know, has been really difficult, but it also has allowed us to really think about how do we emerge from this pandemic a better organization, and what do we pull through that we want to continue forward. And our educators have been amazing as they've navigated many different changes and providing an educational opportunity for our students that I agree with Ms. Ellison. This has absolutely not been a lost school year, and I have tons of pride in what our school district has been able to do. And we will absolutely get our kids caught back up if we have kids who aren't there, and we know we do have kids who aren't there. But we are thinking about that. And so how do we help our students have agency? How do we help our educators have agency? And we have these awesome new facilities that we all know are in process or going to be in process. And we have this new flexible furniture that's coming through. And all of that has been built in this future of learning in our strategic plan. And so we are in a position to become the organization that we have all talked about. And the pandemic has forced a change, albeit super abruptly, but we will emerge from this a better organization in ways. And so how do we come back together as adults in our system and wrap our arms around students and families and come back together as a community through what's been a really difficult year for so many people. And so people keep laughing at me, but I am looking forward to spring and excited about the opportunity that's before us. And so I think it's important that you understand that the strategic plan, while maybe it's not outwardly talked about, that's intentional because it absolutely is becoming part of the fabric of who we are as an organization. And people talk about future of learning and aligning to the strategic plan in a way that it absolutely is not a plan that sits on a shelf and is changing who we are, but it's not in trying to meet what the district says. It's about meeting what we believe is best for students. So I'm excited for you to learn more about the awesome things that are going on in our building as we move forward. So any questions for me or Dr. Kazmierczak?
Thank you, Dr. Gillespie. Are there any questions regarding the strategic plan update?
I have one, Chair Mullen. This is Deb.
Ms. Blood?
Actually, don't have a question. I just kind of have a comment. I think you guys have done a great job of trying to align all of the work that we've been doing with the plan. A lot of people can put out a plan, but then they don't follow through on any of the measures that they say that they're going to be doing. So I think this is great. And I think as bad as the pandemic has been and as hard as it has been on everybody, I think, I think out of hardship, we can make some of the biggest advances because it kind of lays bare what's important and what's not. So I think everyone's done some really good work this year, and I'm really proud of our district.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Blood. You have another question? Yes.
I did want to mention one thing that I forgot, we'll bring more information, but we are, like every other district, in the process of putting together an application to apply to be able to offer distance learning as an option moving forward. And so we're in the very beginnings of that, but we'll bring more solid information to the board. But I would imagine you've been getting questions, and we have, and so we're working through that. That was on one of the bullets I forgot to mention.
Thank you very much. Other questions, comments? Okay. Is there anything to close? Are you guys good? Thank you very much. Thank you all for your work. I really appreciate it. We will now move to our next discussion item, B3, which is the school start time adjustments for 2021 and 22. Dr. Kazmierczak.
All right, thank you, Chair Mullen, members of the board. So I'm going to kick this off, and then I'm going to let you know who's all here so that we can, as a team, answer any questions that you have regarding this proposed change. So I'm first going to walk through just a few talking points, especially for those who might be watching us stream the meeting. And I know board members, you've had a chance to read through the materials, but so referring to our strategic plan again, this concept of changing school start times was part of strategy 2. All right, thank you for advancing. So again, Dr. Gillespie mentioned this previously. We will provide expanding access to a broad range of opportunities for all students. Specific result 5A, academic scheduling is critical to the social and emotional well-being of each student. And then specifically evaluate and revise start times of elementary, middle, and high school using evidence-based best practices. Interestingly, during the 2018-19 school year, when we ran our ideas competition, this concept emerged as one of the top favorites, one of the top vote getters of over 140 ideas submitted by staff, and this idea rose to the top in terms of importance that we see get moved forward. The proposed change aligns with research on adolescent sleep. I provided a couple of resources in the board packet, but essentially, let me just find my note here. So there are many resources that talk about delaying school start times for adolescents and shown benefits, including improved academic performance, reduced engagement in risky behaviors, improved health. More specifically, later school start times positively correspond to improved attendance, including fewer tardies, fewer disciplinary issues, reduced irritability, fewer symptoms of depression, and fewer motor vehicle crashes. And there's a wide body of research on adolescent sleep. This next point is important because as we went through our facilities planning, we committed to the city of White Bear Lake and our neighbors here of North Campus, and ultimately when the Unified High School is open in the fall of 2024, that we would take into account traffic patterns and try to minimize the impact on the site. And according to the study that we had completed, an 8:30 start time for high school is the optimum time in order to do that. And so we've made that commitment, and it's an important consideration as we move forward. Next, the proposed change, and we have Mike Torito on with us, and he's our transportation director, and so he can speak to more specifics. But this particular setup, this particular schedule allows us to run a more efficient transportation system. And I mentioned in the materials is it's a 3-tier system, and what that means is one bus runs. Our goal is to run 3 different tiers in the morning, so they'd be transporting elementary, middle, and high school students. So this particular example allows us to run much more efficiently, and we're estimating that we will be able to save over $600,000 a year in operating costs. Now, I don't think we're being overly optimistic on that number, and in fact, there's a chance that it could be more than that, but we've landed on using that as our talking point at this point. So the proposed times, let's just put those up, and I won't read through them all, but I will go through the column over on the right. So with our elementary schools, all but Matoska, the hours would be from 7:45 to 2:15. Matoska would be 8:30 to 3. Our middle schools would be 9:15 to 4. North Campus would be 8:25 to 3:10. South Campus 8:45 to 3:30, and the ALC would be 8:40 to 3:25. Okay, so that's the plan overview. And I just want to mention who I have here today. We have Mike Torito, as I mentioned earlier. We have Christina Thayer Anderson. She's our early childhood coordinator. Dan Schmidt is here, and we might have one more elementary principal as well, as John Leininger might have joined us. Don Bosch is here, South principal. Catherine Peterson is here. Dr. Christina Pierre is here, our middle school principals, and Brian Peliquin is here, our activities director. So with
Wayne,
that,
one. Christina's the out of school times coordinator with Extended Day. You mentioned early childhood.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
So, Dr. Kazrachek, if I may, I have a couple comments and then a kind of a question. So, depending on the feedback that you received this evening from board members, the process with this moving forward is that you will bring it to a board meeting for approval, or what's the can you just lay out that process a little bit for everyone before we ask questions and kind of move through that?
Yep. So this week and hopefully tomorrow, we'll be sending a message out to our families that details the plan. Really, the information we're sharing tonight is what we'll send out, and we'll have an opportunity for families to provide feedback on the plan. And then over the next few weeks, we will work to address the questions that arise and make any tweaks if we're able. And then, yes, at some point, and I would like to be able to come back in early April 12th, and ask the board to take action on this. Some of these things are time sensitive given the conversations around the budget planning as well. So there's a lot to balance. If we're feeling like that's too soon, then we would take action in May. But we're going to target April as the date that we would act on this.
Okay, and then just if I can, some of my questions or concerns, and there were definitely concerns is how we're managing the activities for students. with the middle school starting or ending late, there's a lot of activities, and making sure that we're being equitable through those pieces for them and allowing them to participate in activities without having to be there extremely late at night. And then the other question that I had is around childcare for our elementary students. One of the things currently around shifting childcare more to the afternoon, is there an additional charge that would be that our parents would have to, when budgets are tight already, is there an additional charge that they would have to incur accordingly? So just to kind of get you through those, and then you can kind of lead the charge there for me, and then I'll ask for others.
Sure. So with activities, I don't know if if either middle school principal or if Mr. Peliquin, if you want to jump in and talk through how you envision this impacting student activities, I certainly can kick it off. But
I can start from a high school standpoint if you would prefer, Dr. K. That would be no problem.
Mm-hmm.
To answer your questions about activities from a high school standpoint, a typical day, we run 2 sessions of after school sports practices. Our after school clubs and activities wouldn't be impacted. Obviously, they would just go after school at a later time. We would still run activities buses. So I'm not nearly as concerned about our student interest clubs, our NHS student council, knitting club, things like that. Our sports teams typically run 2 sessions of practice times. So those would get pushed back into the evening a little bit more, which may impact our youth associations who reserve our spaces after our high school sports teams are done with practice. Would be a slight adjustment. And then the only other concern that you could come up with would be many of our lower level contests for our sports teams take place at 4 or 4:30. And when we are looking at away contests, it would mean for our lower level games that those students participating may have to get out of class early more frequently than they currently do to get to those contests. Like lower level soccer starts at 4, lower level basketball, lower level volleyball. Most of our baseball and softball games start at 4. So it would be those kids on those nights where they have away contests. Obviously, there's a difference between traveling to Roseville, Mounds View, or Irondale, Forest Lake versus traveling down to Park or Eastridge, or some of our non-conference games. Distance travel time would be a difference, but other than that, we could definitely make it work with a later ending time from a high school activity standpoint.
And then
I could talk a little bit about middle school and some things. One advantage that I see in this is we do have some activities that currently take place even before the school day starts. So there are some different music opportunities that take place prior to school. So this actually creates a little bit larger window for us. And it gets me thinking about what might be some other opportunities that could be in that place as well. And then I do know that a lot of our students are involved in the youth association activities. And so that would continue. And then, I guess we'd have to have more discussion in regards to kind of the current activities that we have in the middle school, after school, where we have some different book clubs or we have the musical or those sorts of things. But I would anticipate that we would still be able to have some of those and then work with transportation in regards to an activity bus going home.
Yeah, I've spoken with Mike Carito about the activity bus. So really our middle school activities would just shift an hour later. So right now they go from 3:15 to 4:45. So they would just go from 4:15 to 5:45. And then we would just run those activity buses an hour later as well.
So specifically, as most I have a swimmer, right? And I remember when he was in 7th grade and he took part in the swim program. So how will that, have we just, and I'm not saying we need an answer today because I don't know that there is one, but I would just ask us to really think through how they get to make sure that they're getting, equal time in the pool and making sure that they're getting those things. And I'm sure there are other sports where middle school students participate in and with those sports to make sure that we're just getting, equitable time inside of that arena. So I'm just asking you to please consider it and think through it is that's, how important it is.
Yep.
And then the childcare piece, Dr. Kazmierczak, or is that a
Yep.
later discussion?
Christina Thayer Anderson is on, and Mr. Mauer, if you're going to kick it out.
Yeah, I can start off with a couple things. So yeah, Chair Mullen, that's a really good question, and we've started to dive into those questions a little bit and talk about what programming would look like next year with those changes and what opportunities there could be. So yeah, you would be correct with the longer time in the afternoon. We would have to kind of look at what those fees would be and what those fees would be like for parents. I have started some conversations with some other colleagues of mine in other districts who have gone through this before. So there's a couple things to consider in terms of it can be somewhat of a trade-off where if we're going earlier and some parents don't need care in the morning and that extension time in the afternoon, it can be a wash of sorts. And there also could be that instance too of with that added time in the afternoon. So somebody who doesn't typically have morning care, just afternoon care, there could be an extended time. So we are looking at various different options and exploring what that means for families. And Christina can speak to a little bit more in terms of what those programs could look like, and then what communication we'll be sending out to parents following the district message tomorrow, and trying to gauge what would families be interested in with our options. So Christina, you want to dive into that a little bit?
Yes, thanks. So just quickly to talk a little bit about the parent input. I'm so sorry. I have a newborn here. Hang on. I'm sorry. My husband just got home, so he's taking her. So about the feedback piece, though, we are going to survey families, keeping in mind this will be our currently enrolled families, to try to get more information on what their needs would be, and specifically looking at, and unfortunately we're talking just current families, though we're putting information on our webpage to seek more feedback as well from other families. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I could. So we plan to send out a survey to our current families, like she mentioned, just to kind of see what their interests may be and for these options. And then, like Christina said too, to expand on that to get, if there are families out there who currently do not use extended day, but would be interested in using in this type of a situation with the different times and what they would look like there.
And the one other thing I think is important is, as Tim mentioned, we know other districts have gone through these shifts before. So we have, for good and for bad, feedback from our colleagues, and to try to be as prepared as possible to meet the need, because it is a significant concern. And I have kids of my own that are elementary aged, and I would want, if I wasn't an insider, I'd want to know what my options would be, because certainly I can't have them coming home off the bus at such an early time. So, but we have like I said, a strong team and other districts that we can look to learn from and be prepared.
Thank you very much. Ms. Beloy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering what the difference, why Matoska had a different time than the other elementaries.
I can go ahead and answer that. When we were looking at the morning bell times, we figure we're going to be out at those elementary schools dropping off in neighborhoods. And Matoska, we are transporting the entire district down to Matoska. So it's a little more time and possibly to cut some of that ride time off if we're out in those neighborhoods. Just like the high school, we're able to grab those kids and bring them down and not have, hour-long rides to bring them to school. So that's the reason why for the Matoska. It's basically the entire district boundary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Chapman, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them. The first one is, I know that the city or the St. Paul School District a few years ago was the big one that that went in terms of changing its scheduling of schools start times. What other districts? I'm not totally sure or aware of what other districts in the metro area have changed up their start times in recent years. Any close to us? Anybody that could speak to that? I'd appreciate it. And the other question is, and I guess this is for Mr. Torito, as far as I think I had seen the cost savings would be upwards of probably 9 buses, possibly not running if this change were to occur. Compared to what we've got now, are those buses or would those routes be contract routes? Would they be owned bus routes or a combination of the two? So those are my two questions at this point.
Sure, I can answer the second one. We always look to keep our own bus drivers, our own White Bear Lake drivers going. I would look at possibly, if needed, we're looking at contracted routes, kind of running more efficiently so we don't have such a demand of our contractors. So, and then the only other school I think that has shifted times that I know of might be South Wash. Might have shifted time a few years back.
Yeah, Wayzata did recently. I mean, we can certainly try to compile a list, but this started in the late '90s with Edina, and there's been quite a few that have actually shifted over the last 20 years. So the research has grown over that time, and there are quite a few districts that have made the shift. So we'll work on getting a list for you, Kim.
Okay.
Dr. Kazmierczak, Mounds View Schools went through a district-wide school start time adjustment starting in 2016 that I was a part of, and they as of 2018 went with a whole new set of start times that looks very similar to what you have presented tonight.
So Mounds View would be probably the closest one to us at this point that's gone through a change in start times, the way it sounds. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Dr. Arcand, did you have a question?
I think it was answered. Can you hear me first?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was asked and answered, so I'm good.
All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Ellison, did you have a question?
I did. So when you find information about the other school districts that have made this change, I'd be interested to see what changes they might have seen with their students. Do they have any sort of data? Because I've looked at the research and it's very clear that starting earlier for elementary and later for secondary is better for students, and it helps them be their mental health in particular. We're talking a lot about that these days, as we should be, and it's helping our students follow their natural sleep patterns. So I would really like, if their information is available, how has it worked in Wayzata, St. Paul, Mounds View, so that we can think about that as we move forward.
Well, we can certainly look to see if they've gathered data around that, but I think the studies that have been conducted are pretty, as you mentioned, are pretty conclusive. So, but we'll see if anyone else has also gathered similar data.
And Dr. Kazmierczak, you've gone through this process before? I
have. Yep. When I was in my previous district, we made a change that's very similar to this. Mm-hmm.
And I think these questions are all really good because this would be a big change for our families in our district, and big changes are always hard. But I think considering how this would impact the health of our students, I mean, that feels like, for me, that feels like priority number one. I have small kids, so elementary kids, so this would be an adjustment for my family, absolutely. But I think if we keep our focus on, what's best for the health of our kids, that's where I would like to see us go. So. And the other, I mean, and then the other benefits as well, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Dr. Newmaster, did you have a comment or a question? Dr.
Okay,
Newmaster?
just quickly, the research is there and the questions are there, so we've covered all of that. I'm just thinking of how we train our kids or parents or crossing guards, because my kids walked from their daycare on Deborah down to Lincoln every morning, and there was a bigger cohort of kids back then because they were 93 and 97 graduates. And I can only wonder, have we changed the distance? What's the distance for a little kid walking early on in the morning? Because they're going to have to leave, 20 after 7, depending on how far, if it's 6 blocks or whatever. So that's just something I hope you're thinking about, how far the littler ones will get a bus. And I'm glad we're saving some money, but I'm hoping little kids aren't going to walk, what is it now? I don't remember. Is it 3/4 of a mile or something like that?
Well, with the pandemic this year it is, but these numbers and everything figured out, the bell times is still using the walk distance of the 1/2 mile that we were using, that we have in policy. So it's a 1/2 mile is what we've been using and figuring these out.
Is that for elementary?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only question. And the kids in my neighborhood, the sidewalks aren't always plowed. We're off 120 and they go to, well, we don't have a local one anymore because it's Mataska. But I mean, there's places that it's not safe to walk on the street. So I just wondered, it's good to know it's 6 blocks or so. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Newmaster. Ms. Thompson, did you have a question?
I guess I have more, just a couple comments. There's a lot of research out there, and it all shows that for our older students, later start times have large impacts on their learning, and not only their learning, but I did find, and I believe they probably mentioned it, but there is a very large table study that shows even the difference that these kind of changes make in students' dangerous behavior, in their suicide and mental health behavior. The data is all there that shows us. The CDC has done studies. There's currently a public health campaign by the American Academy of Sleep called the National Healthy Sleep Awareness Project. And they have even a letter on their website that allows parents or members of a community to fill it out and send it to their school district, asking them to consider changing start times for the older students, because the proof is there that as we get older, our melatonin releases at a later time and goes later into the morning before it stops releasing, which our students are much more sleepy. It causes more accidents as they're driving to school in the morning, and all that stuff. And Seattle, Washington, when they changed their start times from 7:50 a.m. to 8:45 a.m., they had there's a study out there, and you can Google it, that shows the grade improvement in their high school students went up drastically. So I think the research is definitely there that shows our older students. I know my daughter is a senior, and getting her to be able to fall asleep before midnight is, her brain doesn't shut down until then. So I think it is all very great stuff. North Dakota has done this. All of the schools in Fargo have later start times. It has had good impacts in their districts. California, I believe, is the first state that passed a law saying that no high schools or middle schools can start before 8:30 a.m. because of this research. So I think the movement is out there, and it's something definitely that we should be considering. And I think the largest impact definitely will be, our extracurricular activities and making sure we can make those things work, as well as our elementary students. I know that my family never qualified to get that assistance to help pay for our kids to be in extended care, but we needed them to be in extended care. And it was an impact on our house budget for sure. And I just want to make sure that we don't have any little kids who are getting off the bus alone and going home because their families can't afford for their child to be in the extended day program. So those would be my main concerns. Otherwise, I appreciate this work and this and moving in this direction. I think it is something that I see us being able to make happen, but just making sure that we get all the pieces to connect the right way so we don't have a negative impact on some of our families. But thank you for bringing this to us. I like it.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Ms. Beloy, did you have an additional comment?
No, I was just pressing the raise hand, lower hand, raise hand, lower hand. Trying to get it to turn off.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any additional comments, questions, concerns? All right.
Chair Mullen, I have one.
I just saw that, Vice Chair Chapman.
All right. This is just a question relative to the research, I guess, that has been done. I suspect that once a district or once districts have implemented this, that whoever has done these various studies have also determined, the true effects of the impact on the secondary students. Where I'm going with this is, a parent of teenagers, like Ms. Thompson has mentioned, my kids stay up until, God knows who knows. Sometimes I wonder well into the late night, early morning hours. And, I guess this kind of begs the question of if an adjustment is made to start times, has there been anything to suggest that the kids are adjusting their schedules, going to bed later, knowing that they have to get up later for school? If there's anything to indicate that that's not a problem, or the jury is out, or it is a problem, where adjustments and start times have been made, but then, like I said, the kids have adjusted their schedules in terms of going to bed later. So if anybody can speak to that, I'd sure appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I do think that's been part of the studies, but I can certainly do more follow-up on that. Generally, the students go to sleep when their bodies tell them to go to sleep. And there typically hasn't been an adjustment in going to bed even later because of the start time. But I'll find that information for you, Kim.
Yeah, I kind of figured as much, that the studies would have, taken that into consideration and tracked the results of those implementations. But, it is something that's at the forefront of my mind, just wondering, what the net effect would be on something like this.
That isn't to say that some students might not do that, but I think the overall,
right.
Overall, that they don't do that as a whole.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Thompson, did you have an additional question?
I would just wanted to let Mr. Chapman know that I can, after this, I can forward you the study that I found on the CDC's website, and their table that's linked to it for grades 9 through 12. And it goes through, they have 1991 in there as like their starting base, but then it's 3 years, 2001, 2013, 2015. And it just shows, it has a lot of information on it, and it shows the numbers of the impact of having those later start times, and how it impacted things such as suicide, drinking and doing drugs, even going so far as wearing their seatbelts more often when they get more sleep. And it's got all kinds of stuff on here. So I will share that, or I can share it with Dr. Kazmierczak, and then maybe he can forward it to the entire board. But
Thank you.
it's
I
a
would
helpful,
encourage you.
it's a helpful graph to see.
That'd be great. Thank you, Angela.
Ms. Thompson, I would encourage you to share it with Dr. Kazmierczak, and then he can share it out with the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Dr. Kazmierczak, do you have anything that you'd like to close with?
No, that's it. Thank you all, and we'll get a message out this week to families, and we'll keep you updated along the way about what we learn.
All right. Thank you all very much. We will now move to our next discussion item, which is the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget adjustment update. Mr. Wald.
Thank you, Chair Mullen, members of the board, Dr. Kazmierczak. At our January 25th work session, we reviewed the adjusted fiscal year 21 budget. We took a preliminary look at the fiscal year 22 budget. Then on February 8th, at that school board meeting, you approved the FY 21 adjusted budget. And now as we're preparing our budget for next year, we're working hard to identify necessary adjustments to first bring our expenditures in line with our revenues, and then secondly, bring our fund balance back to our policy level. Next slide. So why now? First, I'd say it's not uncommon for school districts or really any large organization to make budget adjustments from year to year. That being said, throw an international pandemic into the mix, and those of us in education, like so many other industries across the country, are making budgetary adjustments really necessary if we want to continue to provide the quality and necessary services during these difficult funding periods. So as we drill down into our specific circumstances, enrollment for the 2021 school year is 325 students below the budgeted enrollment projection, and that pandemic impact experience across the state. And so you probably saw newspaper articles this week that reported that enrollment across the state of Minnesota in public schools is down about 2%. Most of those students participating in homeschool. Districts are really not expecting all of those students to return quickly. That will take some time. Our kindergarten class, for example, this year is down about 10%. And we are expecting some of those students who just delayed, kind of took that red shirt year for their kindergartner, that they'll be sending them back this year. But we don't know that for certain how that will work out. And so we're working hard to reach out to those families and get a sense. Some of those families just never registered with us last year, so we're not exactly sure who they are. But for those who had registered and withdrew, we're reaching out to them. Underfunded mandates have had a significant impact on school district budgets at both the state and federal level. That's particularly true in the special education world. State of Minnesota has made some progress in this area, but for too many years, the underfunding of special ed has squeezed public school budgets, and it's created an imbalance of revenues and expenditures for many school districts. So while we're happy the state of Minnesota is working to address this, the federal government's continually decreased special ed funding to public schools. And so that continues to be a challenge, but again, we're feeling positive that the state has taken steps and will continue to take steps in the right direction. Flexible delivery of learning models during the pandemic have required additional staffing beyond what was budgeted, increasing the gap between revenues and expenditures. And so as we've seen a decrease in enrollment, the multiple shifts in learning models have not come without additional expenses. And we're certainly thankful for the CARES Act funding. That was a great help to us. And we're hopeful there'll be additional funds available in the future. But the shifting learning models, especially most recently when we really put our Distance Learning Academy in full force, did not come without increase in expenses. Next bullet, the state has not historically funded education at a pace to cover modest cost of living increases. And I have a graph that I'm going to show you in a moment that demonstrates that. And then again, our policy for fund balance is projected to be, or is at 12.5%. We're projected to be below that. And so we have work to do to get our fund balance back within policy limits. This chart is the one I just mentioned, and it shows state funding has not maintained pace with inflation over time. So if the student formula, which accounts for over half of our funding, had kept pace with inflation over time, the per student allotment would be $639 higher than it currently is, and our revenues would be increased by $5.4 million. So school districts are not immune to inflation. In fact, human resource heavy industries like public schools typically see a higher rate of inflation than the CPI. So when you follow that green line on the graph is where we are, and you can see that it just simply has not kept pace with CPI. This chart I've shown you a few times, and it shows our past and projected enrollment from 2015 out through 2025. And if you follow those orange bars, you can see that we saw pretty steady enrollment growth from 2015 through 2019, leveled out in 2020. And then in this year, we see the dip from what we projected to what we realized. And if you follow those black bars moving forward, you can see what we had originally projected our enrollment to be, and we're going to continue to recover. But some of the students that we lost, we won't get back, and so that we're projecting in growth in enrollment. We're just not projecting it to be as fast as we had originally projected prior to the pandemic. Joining me tonight is Andy Johnson, our Director of Finance. She's going to walk us through some of the next slides that talk about where our money comes from, how our money is spent, and then review the budget that we presented. So Andy Johnson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So on this slide, we show where our money comes from. So as you can see, the vast majority of our revenue comes from state sources, about 54.6%. The next chunk comes from special ed, which is also a state revenue. So in total, between state aids and special ed revenue, that's about 67%. Federal sources is a small 2.4%. CARES funding, that one-time funding, we have about 4.4% of our revenues for, again, this current school year coming from that one-time CARES money. And we have property taxes coming in at about 23.3%. And then other, that would be things like activity fees, miscellaneous donations, just miscellaneous revenue there, about 2.2%. Next slide. So as we know, in schools, our greatest asset is in our people. And that's certainly reflected here when you see that our salaries and benefits accounts for about 81.5% of our total budget. Next, we have purchase services, which that would include things like our contracted transportation would be included in there, some buildings and grounds contracted services. That's a total of 9.6% in the general fund. Supplies and materials come in just shy of $6 million or 4.8%. And capital expenditures at 2.6%, and then other again of just 1.4%. The next slide reflects the same funding or funds in total, but just looking at it in a different way, kind of by department or program. So regular instruction takes up the highest percentage at 46%. But really, when we talk about instruction, I would group regular instruction, vocational, special ed, instructional support, and pupil support services. All of those together account for 78.5%. All of those are services that are really held in connection with students in the buildings. Then you have transportation at 5.8%, sites and buildings at about 8%, other, because there's always an other. Administration would be at 4%. So that would be like our superintendent, our principals, the school board, all of that expense is rolled into the administration. And then district support services would be things like our department, the finance department, or the HR department, advertising, that type of thing. Go to the next slide. So here we just have kind of the summary document that you've seen several times now. Just reminding you, in the yellow is what was approved at the February 8th meeting, showing total revenues of $123 million, $115,000 and expenditures of $122,955,000. But then highlighting in orange is the preliminary proposed preliminary budget, I would say, for next school year, where again, we're projecting a deficit of $6.8 million. And that's why we are where we are and why we're doing what we're doing right now. As a target for budget adjustments, we're kind of focusing on that scenario B at the bottom. Just to look at a target right now of about $4 million of budget adjustments for next school year. And then following, we'd be looking to increase our fund balance by 1% year over year. And to get there right now, based on what we know of the budget, we would be looking at about $3.6 million of adjustments in the 22-23 school year, and then $650,000 of adjustments in the 23-24 school year.
Okay, so next slide. We've developed, as we've gotten into this work, this is hard work and it's important work. We're making adjustments to our budget that are significant and that will be felt. And so as we do this work, we thought really important that we have some guiding principles in how we do that work to help us make sure we're staying on track. The first principle here is our highest priority will be to minimize the impact on the classroom. So we've been working to identify adjustments that stay clear of the classroom, looking at operational and programming adjustments as such that will allow us to stay within the class size targets and still help bring our expenses down. So not too long ago, we talked about school start times and that there's a potential savings of $600,000 in transportation with that adjustment. And so of that $4 million, $600,000 could be realized just in that one move. So now it's also important to understand that during this COVID year, we've had to staff at a higher level than we normally would given our enrollment. So we'd expect to be staffed appropriately in the future given our enrollment. And that will likely mean less teaching positions. It wouldn't be a cut of positions as much as just staffing to our enrollment. The second bullet is we will remain committed to our equity commitment. So looking at how the changes impact students who have traditionally been marginalized within our system, and we're for which we've created barriers in the past. We want to make sure that we don't create barriers to equity and the decisions that we make. And so that's part of our guiding principles as well. The adjustments will be sustainable. So an adjustment that's a one-time adjustment, Ms. Johnson just mentioned CARES Act. That's a one-time adjustment. It's super helpful, but it doesn't really come into play aligning our expenditures to our revenues. And so one-time adjustments will not really count toward that $4 million in adjustments. So we're certainly thankful when we identify those, and we'll work hard to identify them. They'll really help us as we build our fund balance back. Attrition will factor into the reduction. So as we're adjust our staffing levels to match our enrollment, every year we have staff that retire, that resign for various reasons, and we expect that the attrition within our workforce would help us with those adjustments, and it wouldn't be felt people being cut to the same degree. Next bullet, staff across the district are encouraged to share ideas of how to decrease spending and increase revenue. We really appreciate our staff who have submitted ideas. We presented to all of our buildings and we asked teachers and any staff member to please pass on ideas you have to help us adjust our budget. What are things you see that would maybe the different lens on how we could fix it? And so quite a few ideas have come in. We've been working hard on analyzing those, costing them out, and seeing what we can do. So thanks to the teachers, staff members, principals who have submitted so many ideas. A budget adjustment committee made up of district and building administrators will review proposals and make adjustment recommendations. That group met today. And there'll be next steps tomorrow. Cabinet will take a look at it, and then the Executive Finance Committee on Thursday or on Wednesday, excuse me. And then finally, the guiding principle of our adjustments will equal $4 million. Next steps, the next slide here. So just pointing out, you've seen this before, but we're now at the February 22nd, 23rd, where the budget recommendation work team and the cabinet are reviewing ideas for adjustments today and tomorrow. And then Wednesday, Mr. Mullen and Ms. Beloyd, as members of the Executive Finance Committee, will help us review those and may have some ideas for adjustments as well. March 1st, a week from tonight, we'll bring preliminary budget proposals to the board. You'll have a chance to provide feedback at that point, and then we'll be asking the board to approve those adjustments on March 22nd. We've done a lot of work in the last month on this, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us in the next month, and we thank our team of administrators and staff who have weighed in and helped us figure this out, and we look forward to bringing some good ideas to you next week.
Thank you, Mr. Wald. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for their work. Are there any questions or comments that anybody would like to make regarding the budget, the budget?
I just have a quick question.
Ms. Floyd.
Mr. Wald, just the timeline. Is this all? I know we've done this the past couple of years because we had to make adjustments last year. Do we always do the presentation of the adjustments at the regular board meeting instead of the work meeting?
That's a good question.
The only reason I ask is it's kind of a different forum for, questions and answers between the two situations. So I'm just going forward. It might be a better time to do that at a work study to go over some of those, the questioning or the question and answering of adjustments at a work study as opposed to the regular meeting. Just a thought off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think this was really about just timing. We have making decisions to make and planning for next year. And so I think this just kind of fits in with our planning. Typically, we're not making significant adjustments that require a lot of discussion, but point well taken.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Ms. Boyd. Is there any other questions or comments regarding the next steps for the budget review? Okay. Mr. Wald, did you have anything that you'd like to close with?
Nope, that's it. Thank you
very much. Dr. Kazmierczak, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nope. We'll see you in a week. I'll wait and see if we're done with this agenda item and then comment on next week.
Okay. I do not see any hands up. Excuse me. Ms. Thompson, did you have a question regarding the budget?
I don't, but I think Jessica has her hand raised.
That's where I was going next. Thank you.
Sorry,
Ms. Ellison, did you have a question regarding the budget?
I just wanted to make a general comment and acknowledge that public education is really complex. And I'm really proud of the work that our cabinet and team and admin have done, because we're talking about huge budget adjustments, pandemic schooling, also dealing with facility updates and continuing the equity work. So I just want to acknowledge that this is a lot of work that doesn't normally get done in a school year, which is already difficult. So thank you to all of the leadership in this district.
Maybe you should go take a nap, Mr. Wald.
I'll take that advice.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the budget? Okay. I will then, is there anything that you have, Dr. Kazmierczak, before we finish up the meeting?
Yeah, I just want to mention that we'll be meeting in person next week. And so we'll figure that out. We'll either be in the auditorium or we'll be in the boardroom. So, and the start time will be 6:30. I think we've talked about keeping our board meetings at 5:30. Just given the odd nature of moving off of the spring break week, we're running into some conflicts next Monday. So we're going to start at 6:30 for that one, but we'll get that posted and communicate that out. So
thank you very much, Dr. Kazmierczak. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to add before we close? Ms. Newmaster, Dr. Newmaster, did you have something you'd like to close with?
You're on mute, Marge.
In the boardroom, it's hard to socially distance, I think, because we're all shoulder to shoulder. So a different arrangement if we're in that room.
Yep, that would be the thinking. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Newmaster. If there's nothing else, I'm going to double check one more time. If there's nothing else, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Chair Mullen, I move for us to adjourn.
I will second that, and we'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thompson,
Aye.
Arcand,
Aye.
Beloit,
Aye.
Chapman,
Aye.
Ellison, I, Mullen,
Aye.
Newmaster.
Aye.
With that, I will say that we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Be safe, and spring is in the air, as they say. See you guys all. See you in a week. Have a good week.
Good
Thanks,
evening,
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.